So, welcome to Learning with Leaders. My guest today is Katie Fisher. Katie and her husband Chad launched Rock City Church in April of 2011 in Columbus, Ohio. They're a multi site church and actually one of the fastest growing in America for quite a few years now. Their mission is to make heaven full. Katie began her career in the business world with very early success and now leads as the executive director of Rock City Church. She's also a mother to two incredible daughters. And full disclosure, Katie and Chad are not only partners with Focus 412, but they are incredibly dear friends with Grace and I. So, Katie, welcome to Learning with Leaders.
Well, thank you. So glad to be here with you.
Yeah, I'm excited about our conversation today, and just we've had a number of conversations about leadership, and I just couldn't wait to have this to share with other people. So I'd love to jump right in, and one of the themes of having been in leadership for a while and really led in multiple contexts, led in rapid growth, would love for you to just share first just a little kind of a thumbnail of your leadership story and kind of how that became leading at Rock City Church.
Yeah, thank you. Well, thanks again for having me. You and Grace and the Focus 412 team mean a lot to Chad and I and our church. And you and I have had a lot of leadership conversations over the years. And so it's just an honor to be here. My leadership journey, like a lot of people, I think even from a young age, I can remember, being in the playground or being in school and just naturally found myself taking the lead in circles and in environments. And so as I grew up and thought about what I wanted to do, I really felt like my path would be in the business world. I got my degree in communications and my master's in organization development and went to work for a Fortune 500 company right out of college and loved that experience. I really thought I'd probably be in that environment for the rest of my life. I thrived there. I had ministry there, and I had a lot of success there. And then God threw us a curveball. My husband was in ministry and was a youth pastor and was seeing a growing and thriving youth ministry. And at the end of kind of the first decade, 2010, God really threw a wrench in our life and called us to plant a church. And it's been a wild ride ever since then. We moved about 2.5 hours south. We live in Ohio, moved from Toledo to Columbus, Ohio, and really parachuted in. We didn't know anybody here. Just a handful of people moved with us, and we got to work at planting our church. And it's been a wild ride ever since.
Well, it's been amazing to be there for part of the journey over the last 4 or 5 years, and it's just been an amazing thing to see. What do you feel like the kind of the deepest, most fundamental lessons you've learned, kind of experiencing not only at Rock City, but really coming into Rock City, doing what you did prior to that? What things do you consider are kind of invaluable that you've learned so far as a leader?
Yeah, in my corporate experience, I was really blessed to be around some incredible leaders that led from a place of values-based leadership. What do we value as an organization, and how can we ensure that everything we do flows out of those values? And so, even though it wasn't a Christian company, that's the place that they led from, and that's kind of the think tank that I grew up in and learned from. And so transferring that to a Christian environment, to a ministry environment was actually pretty easy for me. And that's really the path that Chad and I have tried to lead from, that our directional team leads from, is really, what do we value? And how do we ensure that the values of this organization permeate through everything we do, from the time that you enter our environment to the time you leave, to every interaction you have? We want to ensure that you're sensing and feeling what we're all about in every interaction. And so I think that's one of the biggest things that my previous experience has helped us in, and really the place that we lead from even today.
Yeah. Um, and I know you've, coming, anything that comes with not only leadership, but leading in a very fast paced environment always brings its set of challenges. What kind of, let's talk through some of the challenges you faced and maybe some of the difficulties and some of the learnings through those. I don't know what comes to mind.
Yeah, so much of church planting is responding. You know, we talk a lot about, and people ask, you know, how did you make this decision or that decision? I think really the biggest decision we ever made was to get on the boat. And after that, we've really just been paddling as fast as we can. I think about kind of the analogy of one of those lazy rivers at a water park. You know, you get in the raft, and that's like a really awkward and hard thing to do in
Right.
front of a lot of people. And that's kind of what launching a church is like. And then you follow the river, and that's what we've done. And so, you know, I think just being focused on staying on the boat, staying healthy, staying focused, ensuring that people are alongside of us and going with us is one of the hardest tensions to manage, but it's also the most rewarding because you get this beautiful journey of seeing people's lives transformed and changed, and you know, there's really nothing like it.
Yeah, I think I say sometimes that leadership is a combination of strategy and surfing. And surfing is kind of that, when you said, you know, you get in the boat and you kind of steer down the river, if you will. That's
Yeah.
the surf. That's sometimes leadership is about, you know, knowing which side of the wave to ride and not to get underneath it. But how about a time maybe that was there a time maybe where you felt like you didn't necessarily have an answer to, you know, the river was too deep or too wide, and you know, there was a period of time where you didn't feel necessarily uh, equipped in that moment. Does that circumstance feel familiar?
Yeah, I think many times over the last 13 years have we felt that. Have I felt that? You know, you get to a place, you know, especially in the early days. I remember, you know, I knew everybody that walked through our doors, and
Mm.
that was really amazing. And you know, you'd see a family come in, and you'd see them the next week, and you know, a year or two goes by, and suddenly I don't know everybody anymore because we're growing, and that's a good
Yeah.
problem. So I remember that tension of like, how do you go from knowing everyone to, okay, actually, I hardly know anyone, and building systems around that. And then, you know, fast forward a few years and realizing like our data wasn't accurate in a way that would help us equip our people. And so, you know, building systems around that. And, you know, every time you get to a different growth barrier or you break through a growth barrier, you know, our team has to spend a lot of time asking the question,
Mm.
do our previous systems and structures support what we're experiencing now? And
Yeah.
do the systems and structures we have in place, are they going to support us in the future? And so that those are hard questions to
Right.
answer. They take a lot of time, they take a lot of work. Thankfully, we have partners like you guys to help us navigate through a lot of that. But I think that's the hardest work of leadership, because you really tend to like where you are. Like,
Yeah.
we say we want to grow, but the process of growth is ever changing, it's ever evolving. And so as you're assessing, you know, what's it going to take, like, it's hard work, it demands hard conversations, it demands letting go of things we really loved. We talk a lot about giving up things we love for things we love even more around here. And that's really what leadership is. It's just this continuous loop of letting go and embracing new things, and hopefully you're making the right decisions for future,
Yeah.
but you don't always get it right.
Yeah. I think, and that's something I admire. I mean, I try to, I look to learn from everybody I encounter. And I think one of the things that I've watched you do really well is that difficult point of, in a rapidly scaling organization, working on today's issues, which usually are all encompassing, but also building systems and infrastructure that can accommodate growth. That's, if it comes at the same pace it is, you know, that's taking care of the future. I call it, you know, planting seeds for tomorrow. And oftentimes when you're in a fast growing environment, people get very focused on today and then get hung up
Hmm.
down the road. And I feel like you've really done well. Any thoughts about like, how did you come about figuring that out, and kind of what are some of the lessons around, building infrastructure? You mentioned database, but I've watched you do on the communication side and marketing. And I know there's a lot of technical stuff, but from a leadership perspective, maybe if you could share kind of some of your learnings or how you see that combination of today versus building for tomorrow.
Yeah, I think one of the most difficult things about a church world is that Sunday comes every week. There's a Sunday in every
Yeah.
week. And so you're constantly managing this right now. You're preparing for what's to come in just a few days, which is the most important thing that we do,
Yeah.
with looking ahead 6 months, 9 months, 10 months, 12 months, 2 years. And so I think just really strategically looking at what am I putting my hands to? I can't neglect Sunday. Like, I just came out of a Sunday meeting. Sundays matter. They never won't matter. And
That's so
so
good.
I think if a leader is hoping that someday they'll get to the point where they won't have to worry about Sundays, you're fooling yourself, because if you don't worry about Sundays, your Sundays aren't going to be that great. So it is important that you take time for that. And of course, you need to build systems in place so that a lot of that stuff takes care of itself, and you've got people in place to manage that. But at the end of the day, if Sunday isn't great, I have to own that. Chad has to own that. Our team has to own that. So we want to ensure that happens. But at the same time, I have to be thinking about a Sunday a year from now. And what is our church going to be feeling then? And what is it going to look like then? And how do we ensure we have the people, processes, systems in place to make that Sunday great? And so it's a time game, and there's never enough time. But if you're not spending at least some time thinking about next year's Sunday, you're going to get there, and it's not going to be a great experience.
Yeah. And I think, what we've seen is that not only do you have to plan for those things in the future, but you also have to plan for the fact that it's hard to project what they're going to look like, because they could be, we're coming out of a kind of a crazy season of COVID and then the election and all that. And so there's all that in there as well that I think has to be, there has to be systems that can accommodate seasonal change as well.
Yeah. Hopefully you're building a process and a environment that can respond when God moves, right? If our systems are so rigid that God really can't even move if he wanted to, we're not going to reap the benefit of his blessing. But if we can create agility, if we can create flexibility within our teams where the value of what we do doesn't change, but how we do it, it might change. And that's something you guys say all the time, then you're going to be ready when God moves. You can move with him.
Yeah, I love that. And I mean, it's what I love many things about you and Chad, but it really comes down to you lead with your character, your values, and with the Holy Spirit. And I think it's a hard thing. You probably feel like that's not hard because you do it well. But I think for a lot of us leaders, it's very difficult to not start to scale and systematize things that we don't allow for that, and we get our priorities mixed up. So I love to hear you say that, and I've seen that really play out kind of along those lines. How to lead, one of the premises I think I have in my head is to lead in a very difficult environment, and you've been in one for a while. It takes strong leadership, but we also talk about servant leadership.
Mm-hmm.
And I think sometimes that's a difficult paradigm. How do you think of that, kind of being a strong leader, but also maintaining and being a servant leader? Any thoughts or learnings in that area?
Yeah, I mean, I think it comes down to heart. I think the minute my heart for people isn't there, I know I have an issue. I'll never forget. It's probably 2 years. We were out at the LA Dream Center, spending some time with Pastor Matthew and Caroline Burnett, and we were sitting in the front row, and I was sitting next to Caroline, and I looked over at her. There was a gentleman on the stage, and he was sharing his testimony. And it was a testimony that was amazing, but I've been at the Dream Center many times, at LA Dream Center, and it was a very typical LA Dream Center testimony. It was miraculous. It was amazing. It was a guy, he had been abused for so many years of his life, and he came off of drugs. And I looked over and she had tears in her eyes as she was hearing this story.
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, here's a woman who has heard this story probably thousands of times throughout the time that they've been ministering. And she had not lost her heart for people. They have been through so much as a couple and as a church and as a ministry. And here she was on the front row on a random Thursday, allowing God to touch her heart. And I thought, let that always be me. Like, let me never tire of God's miraculous work in people. Let me never tire of what he does and why we're doing it. And it was just so inspiring. So I think the moment I go to church and I'm not moved, like, I know I need to spend some time with the Holy Spirit, and I need to spend some time in the presence of Jesus, just me and him, because this is why we do what we do. And as somebody who is a bit of a leadership geek, and I can get really nerded out on all the systems and structures and processes, I have to keep myself in a place of, I'm doing this for Jesus.
Right.
And that's the servant leadership. It's for people, but ultimately it's for the glory of the Lord. And so I think there's ways we all know ourselves pretty well, right? And so I think there's ways that we can check that. Something I do, and it's kind of random, is I try to sit in the back of our church a couple times a month.
Yeah.
There's sometimes I'm sitting in the front row and I'm sitting next to Chad or whoever might be up there, but I try to sit in the back and I try to just watch people, and I try to see what God's doing in that space. And usually I'm in tears, by the end of worship, because you're watching a family rush into church and their kids are kind of frazzled. And then the next thing you know, the teenage son is raising his hands, and it's like, gosh, this is why we do what we do. Or maybe a couple comes in and they're, kind of not talking to each other, and then worship happens and you see the husband's back or hand on the wife's back, and it's like the presence of God is here. Thank you, Lord, that I get to be in this space. And so all of what led them to get there, right? The parking team and the ushers and all of the structure, like, that matters. And that's what I get to put my hands to. But at the end of the day, what happens in the presence of God is why we do what we do. So when I think of servant leadership, that's what I think of. And that can take many forms, but it really comes from a tender heart. And if you don't have that, it's not that you can't get it back. You need to get it back, but you need to make sure you do that.
That's so great. And that's such a great learning and something for us to all think about. I think oftentimes I think there's such a stress in leadership, which is important. If you're leading, the presumption is that you're out ahead, right? And you're in the front of the room, if you will. But there is, I think, in my life and leadership, and I know you've shared in yours, getting in the back of the room and being an observer, if you will, does two things. It allows for other people to get up front and for you to develop other people, but also it gives you this perspective of that you don't get from the front of the room. And I think both are important, but I think we have to fight for that time to be in the back and to see, whether it be on the weekend, whether it be in the course of our daily journey as leaders. So that's so good. This is good stuff. Another thing I think I've seen you do really well, and I've tried to learn from you because it's not necessarily a natural strength for me, is communication. And when I say communication, I think in terms of, in the church, we always think of, the platform, preaching, those kind of things, inspirational communication, biblical communication. There's also organizational communication, which I think is probably less known and sometimes isn't as recognized as in stack of importance. So talk about the things you've learned about what things are important, and any lessons you've learned in communication, because you kind of cover the swath from public communication to marketing and the rest. So would love to hear any thoughts you have about your journey in organizational communication.
Yeah, it really is rooted in the firm belief that everything we do communicates something.
Mm,
Everything we do. So, um, and you can't not communicate. So sometimes I'm in a meeting and I hear leaders say, should we communicate this or should we not? Well, that's really not a question, because even the art of asking that question is communicating something. And so choosing to not communicate is communicating something to our people. It's communicating something to our teams.
yeah.
So that's really where I come from. And then it's looking at how is what we're doing communicating where we're going
Mm,
and what we're about. And so we look a lot around here at like our words, but how do our actions align to those words? I call it the say do. What we're saying has to match what we're doing. And we
yeah.
don't get it right 100% of the time, but I think the more you can get that right, the higher trust you have with the people that God has brought you. And so the say do matters a ton. And that really permeates into everything, from the stage to our team huddles to if I've got a leader, we have a leader in our organization that is saying one thing and doing another, they might as well pack it up and go home. Or if I'm saying, hey, this is what's really important, but my day-to-day actions aren't aligned with that, I might as well pack it up and go home. And so I think it's a very difficult thing to get our arms around. But when you can understand that everything you do communicates something, it can really transform your organization, build trust, it can create speed, and ultimately productivity, ultimately reaching more people because you're way more effective.
Yeah. One of the things I've seen you do that I think is very bold, is we've been in large, team environments with your team of, could be 30 people in a room, 20 people in a room that are having a pretty structured conversation, not structured as in it's all planned out, but it's about something to accomplish. It's a working meeting. It could be brainstorming, or it could be building something, or doing an assessment. We've done all those environments.
Hmm.
And what would you say to leaders that feel very hesitant? I've worked with a lot of leaders that probably wouldn't get that many people in the room, because they would, there's varying reasons, but it can be just the trust factor of, a lot of different levels and opinions. And how do you keep that productive? And how do you kind of keep, those things going? And I feel like you do that really well. Is that something that you've kind of grown into? Does that still make you, if you will, nervous? It may only be my paranoia, but and I'm actually very comfortable in those environments, but I do work with a lot of people that probably would love to be encouraged, or understand kind of how to do that well.
Yeah, I think who's in the room does matter.
Mm,
And so there are times when, you if you're trying to figure something out, I'm a big working genius uh, nerd, and so you're looking at like, okay, do we have the right combination of people to get something done? But I think on the flip side of that is this question of like, why wouldn't I want this person in the room? And taking time to answer that is a really, it's hard, right? But sometimes it's okay. The root cause of it is I don't have trust, or I think there might not be alignment, or
mm,
I think they might not be equipped. And if it's any of those three things, I need to go get working on that before I try to start excluding people from spaces. And so,
right.
it is a tension, and I think you have to use wisdom and discernment in building environments where you're working on things. There are people on our team that, frankly, sometimes there's rooms I shouldn't be in because my makeup isn't going to add value in that space. And then there's other times when it's like, okay, we're problem solving, the time to wonder might be over now. We're really into action mode. And so there's a combination of people on our team that we might bring together for that specific purpose. But the reality is, every room I'm in, I'm observing, I'm assessing, I'm looking at what questions are being asked, I'm looking at who's engaged. And so if you're so in the weeds of the meeting that you can't step back a little bit and observe and extract some qualitative information about what's happening in that meeting, it's worth the risk. of like what could be said in the meeting to gather that information, because you're going to learn a lot about people. Sometimes, you have a larger meeting and there's somebody new to the team, and gosh, they just ask some great questions. And you think, okay, that's actually a person who may have some great insight in help solving this or that problem.
Mm.
Other times there might be a high level leader who is quiet as a mouse in a meeting, and he or she shouldn't have been. And so that's a great opportunity to just address that, offline, and say, hey, I noticed you were really quiet in that meeting. Is anything going on? And it doesn't always have to be something sinister. Maybe they didn't sleep that well that night before, or maybe they have something going on at home. But all of those things are like pastoral opportunities. So those environments don't scare me as much as they used to. I think early in my career, I was always curating and calculating, and how do we make sure this is like an optimum group of people? I'm just less worried about that now, because I think there's value in the observation. There's value in everyone hearing the same thing at the same time, and making sure that you're maximizing that.
Yeah, that's so good. That's so good. Speaking of people, we know that one of the greatest challenges, especially in a fast-growing environment, is staffing a team and building a great team. And you've been very successful at that. I'm sure it's been difficult. It always is. And I know it's a big topic, but kind of the two pieces are typically recruiting and then developing team. What is your secret sauce at that very difficult process?
Well, I don't know that I would say we're very good at it. And I would say if any leader says they are really good at it, they probably aren't accurate in their assessment. It feels like the thing that is always, I want to say it's keeping me up at night, but it's always the area that I feel we need to grow in the most is recruiting, retaining, developing leaders. If you're growing, you need to do that, and you're always probably pretty far behind. So with that disclaimer, I think we've been blessed really from the beginning of our church with some incredible heart for the house leaders. We have a group of people on the team that have been with us a very, very long time. And I don't mean with us like Chad and I mean with the church for a very, very long time. And when you have that, there's high trust. And even when tension comes, even when disagreement comes, you're able to push through it because you have a long history of working through things. And so as people have come into the organization at various stages of our church, they're coming into a pretty stable environment where there's a lot of fun, there's a lot of camaraderie, there's a lot of alignment, and there's a lot to celebrate. And so we try to focus on those things. And from a development standpoint, I think over the last 3 or 4 years, we've really shifted how we've done that. And it used to be a bit more organic, like, hey, come to this meeting with me and learn how I do this. And there is some of that, and that's important. And you guys have helped us tremendously in just assessing, where are the gaps in our leadership pipeline? How do we ensure that we don't get to a place where we look behind us and nobody's there ready to take our place? And so we've put some things in place to help with that. We're ever evolving in that, though. Our residency, you guys helped us get that up and running, has been really successful, and we've made some tremendous hires out of that. Our campus pastor development program, and just our volunteer development program, like all of those things really have come out of the work that we've done with you all and have been a tremendous asset to ensuring we're not leading alone, that the load is shared, and that we have a tremendous bench ready to step up and take our place when the time comes.
Yeah, that's so good. And I think it also tracks back to, you laid the foundation earlier in our conversation about, values-based, setting up things so people can succeed, systems, understandable how the work gets done. And I think, if I was to say anything about this, it would be that all of those things matter. There's the direct development. And I think, the heart in which you and Chad and the rest of the team lead other people. It's really about people. And I think all of those pieces, it's a very complex thing, but as you build those values and make all those things, the clearer you can make them, the more people can succeed, and you take some of the unnecessary hurdles off the table. You guys have, excuse me, have done really well in that area. Um, let's talk about, I think I've used the word rapid, demanding. I've used a bunch of words. Hopefully they don't sound negative, but they're challenging. How do you, with all those challenges of leading an organization, especially one that's now scaled to a very large, multi-site across multiple cities, multiple teams in those places and cities, at those campuses, locations. How do you continue to lead well when you're a mother, an amazing mother to two amazing young women, and you're a wife. You are a lot of things and have your personal. So it's how do you maintain a healthy personal spiritual life? And I know that it's all integrated for you, but any thoughts that that might that you've learned, things that you feel are important that would help folks?
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't usually feel like I'm winning in this category.
Mm.
And I think a lot of women feel that. I think a lot of people feel that. Um, it's a bit like whack-a-mole, where, that old game at the arcade where you're like, you whack a mole and then another one pops up. And so the minute, my health is better, something else pops up, or the minute, like, gosh, I've been on a 300-day Bible streak and I'm just rocking my way through the New Testament, something else pops up. And so it's really seasonal, I think, for me. And it's continuing to assess, what does my family need? What do I need right now? What does my family need right now? What does our church need right now? And building my rhythms and life around that for the season that I'm in, not creating unattainable strategies
Mm.
for the next decade, right? So, like, I have a senior right now and a freshman. We're getting ready to launch a really big building in a couple months. So my life right now looks a lot different than it did when they were toddlers. And so if I had put something in place for my life when they were toddlers for this season, like, it looks totally different.
Yeah.
And so just, just practically, like, my oldest daughter started driving about a year ago, total game changer. I gained back like an hour and a half of my day. And so I just really sat down and thought, what do I want to do with that hour and a half? Like, that I suddenly have back. I used to make phone calls. I used to listen to podcasts. Now I don't have that drive time like I used to. So
Right.
I gotta grow
Right.
and communicate differently there. But I also have time that I didn't have, and so filling that with strategic things, with purposeful things, I think has helped. And then just, at the end of the day, sometimes we have to eat out. Sometimes I'm not home to cook dinner. Sometimes, we have to flow, and there has to be a high level of grace on everybody's part for that. And thankfully, my husband's always been really supportive, and we support each other in those ways.
Yeah.
But my life looks different each and every year, and just being grateful for the season we're in, and knowing that next year my rhythms will look different, and I'll try to be as healthy as I can. But likely I'm not going to be at 100% in all categories all the time.
Yeah. That'll be, I love quotes. So we post some quotes on the Focus 412 coaching Instagram. So that'll be our next one. Sometimes you just got to eat out.
Sometimes you just got to eat out. Yeah.
That'll be a good one.
Yeah.
So there's developing other people. There's dealing with, keeping healthy in your personal relationship. How about developing yourself, kind of? And I know the work in front of you is development to the extreme, but like, what things do you find are really super helpful in a very difficult to find time environment to develop yourself when you're serving all these other people on the team? You've got your family. What things have you found that have been really important to you to kind of move the ball forward in your own personal leadership?
Yeah. So I think this is seasonal as well. So I think it's looking, Chad and I take time at the end of each year to look at the year ahead. Where are we going as a family? Where are we going as a church? Where do we go as a couple? And so a lot of times it's just in those seasons looking at, okay, actually, these are the things we want to do. I have a gap in my ability to do that. So I'm going to focus on that one thing. I'm careful not to absorb too much leadership noise. I think there's so much being thrown at us. There's so many amazing podcasts. There's so many amazing books. There's so many amazing resources available to us as leaders that we can kind of get in a paralysis of sorts where it's like, okay, there's no way I can be all of those things. And so it's really looking at, okay, what's God asking us to do? Is there anything I need to adjust in my life or change in my mindset or a learning gap that I have to get me there? And then just focusing on that small thing. Like it's like lifting weights, right? Like you can't go from a 5-pound weight to a 50-pound weight. You have to make incremental improvements. And I think that's what leadership is too. It's like, I can read, I'm looking at all the great books behind you. I could take the next year and read all of those and probably be the same leader I am today. Or I can find out who has done this the best in this area I have a gap in and learn that skill or that trait or that biblical principle, whatever it might be, and focus on that. And my leadership is going to step change time over time, and I'm going to get better and better.
Yeah, that's so good. That's so good. So we at Focus 412 believe that the best development happens in the context of relationships. So who is somebody that's played a pivotal role in your growth as a leader, and what is something practical they did to help you grow?
A woman named Kristen Kelly, who was my first boss at the company I worked for. She was a phenomenal leader, is a phenomenal leader, and she brought me with her. I was 22 out of college. I really didn't know anything. And she just saw something in me and she just brought me along. And I think I'm so grateful she did that for me. I'm so grateful she modeled that for me. And that's really what I've tried to do in my own leadership. And sometimes it's asking, can I come along with you?
Yeah.
Sometimes it's on the role, sometimes it was me saying, hey, could I come? But often she would think, and say to me, why don't you come with me? Why don't you sit in this meeting? Why don't you take this trip with me? And I was just observing, and over time she would give me more responsibility and the organization would give me more responsibility. But I think that's a biblical model for leadership. It's what Jesus did. And it's what we try to do here is come along. Like, let's build systems for that. But also at the end of the day, sometimes it's just, why don't you sit in this meeting with me and hear how I'm responding, hear how I'm answering these questions. And so I'm so grateful she did that early in my career, because it really set a values-based principle for my leadership of, I'm going to be a bringer. I'm going to be someone who is bringing people along with me. And it made all the difference.
Yeah. Access is such a great gift as a leader to give a young leader or another leader. And I love that. I love that story. Well, this has been amazing. I'm wondering if you could wrap us up today by, kind of talking to any of the leaders that are listening and, just give them a word of encouragement about their leadership.
Yeah, we were just in our directional team meeting this morning, and we were talking about the times we're living in, and that we had something occur in our city over the weekend that was really, really horrible and hate-filled and racist, and it was not a good situation. We were talking about that and how difficult it is to lead in this season, and I'm reminded that we were chosen by God to be alive right now. And so our leadership isn't an accident. I know a lot of times we wake up and we think, gosh, why am I leading right now in this point of history? But the Lord knew you'd be here. He knew you'd be leading right now, and he actually chose you to lead right now. And so I think we can all get comfort and encouragement in that. and he can equip us. He does equip us for these times, and it's an honor actually to be leading in this season. It's such a pivotal point in the world, in our history, in Christendom, and we can't underestimate the power of the Lord to do amazing things in and through us if we're willing.
That's a good word. Well, thank you, Katie. I love you and appreciate you and Chad, and thank you for spending some time with us today on learning from leaders.
Thank you. Thank you for your constant encouragement. You are one of, if not the most encouraging people in our lives. And you're just, yeah, I know you're always for us. You encourage us. You laugh with us. You cry with us. Like all of those things that is so valuable in a relationship. You and Grace and the whole Focus 412 team brings to us, and we couldn't be more grateful for you.
Thank you.